So, welcome to the SME Growth Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
That's all right. Very welcome. We've known each other for, a good few years, haven't we?
Yeah, a fair few years.
And so I thought it would be good to have you on the podcast. Do you want to give a brief intro before I start kind of waffling on about other things?
Yeah, so I live in Oswestry. I have a business which originally was a fashion brand. Things have changed recently for various reasons. But it all happened back in 2014, really, for a very specific reason. So,
and I suppose we can get into that in a bit. But I thought your story was really, I guess I sort of followed the fashion brand era of your career, and it was just a really interesting story. And I thought it'd be great. I think there's a lot of lessons that can probably be drawn from that. And so people will hopefully get a lot of value from it, particularly if they're thinking about starting a business or starting a new venture, even in a business. We talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
So, but before we do that, what we normally do is recap on previous episodes. So just so that people listening maybe for the first time can get a feel for the type of things we do. So episode 77, we talked about how to overcome a business crisis, which I'm sure many businesses have found themselves in a situation where they find themselves in a crisis for whatever reason, financial, emergency incidents, all that type of stuff. So we had a bit of a discussion about that. Episode 76, we had some chap on who thought he knew something about LinkedIn. Don't know if you...
No idea who that is.
Disclosure. So that was Vicky's partner, Darren. So how to stand out on LinkedIn, which was a really good episode, which was packed full of really good insights into how to optimize your LinkedIn profile and really think differently about how we use LinkedIn as a place to do business, really, rather than an electronic Rolodex, which is how many people use it.
Yeah.
I'm sure we all know what a Rolodex is for our Gen Z listeners. It's the it's like a phone, but with paper in it. And the episode previous to that, episode 76, we talked about the pitfalls of power, which was based on a HBR, Harvard Business Review article about power traps that people can fall into when they move up an organization. So that was, again, pretty good episode, pretty interesting. So that was our last three episodes, but this episode, I haven't come up with a title yet, but it's Business Lessons with Vicky McKenna.
Oh, right, great.
No pressure.
No pressure.
No pressure. So I suppose we met probably around about 2014, just when you were starting out doing your fashion brand. I think that's probably when I first met you.
Maybe a bit later than that, I think.
Later.
Yeah, when I moved back here, yes, wasn't it? Yeah.
So do you want to give us a bit of a kind of intro into why what led up to you setting up the fashion brand? What was the motivation behind it? All that type of thing.
Okay. So up until 2014, I was a project manager within the telecoms industry, and I've been doing that for about 9 years. And then I'm just going to summarize this really quickly. Yeah. And then that year, so I was 33. I got married. 6 weeks later, we went on the honeymoon, and then I came home and I had a stroke.
Oh my goodness.
So basically, that career, I had to knock it on the head, because I was warned quite explicitly that if I went back to work, because that was my life, I didn't have any children then, we just newlyweds, whatever, and absolutely loved it. But the neurologist had told me, if you go back, you're probably going to risk that level of stress again and a repetition, and you might not be so lucky that.
So was it a stress-related incident?
There were a couple of things in the that were sort of went into the melting pot, but they also found that I had a hole in the heart, which was a birth defect, which I guess from babies born in the 80s, whatever, as they probably didn't check for stuff like that. So that was what allowed the clot to go up to the brain.
Oh wow. Okay. So
basically I then had to. I was not working, so I'd been a contractor for quite some years, and then I was nothing. And I had saved a lot of my money.
Very wise.
For a rainy day. I didn't know what I was saving for, but I was always doing that. And then my husband at the time, is now my ex-husband, was in the military. So he was off on, to Afghan or wherever. And I was just left on my own, just trying to recover, trying to work things out. And I had always had this I thought it was a ridiculous pipe dream that I would design my own fashion line for women, and it would be sort of work-based clothes, because I was always at work in my 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
I was obsessed with work, and I thought, I can, I'll design really nice work stuff. Anyway, so I just started putting that plan into action.
So where did that plan come from? Just a random, was that what you really wanted to do, but you just fell into project management, or was it
project management?
No, sorry, the fashion side. So was that something you'd always wanted to do, but you just had to get a job and you put the dream to one side, or did it just emerge out of just necessity from seeing office attire in the early 90s or late 90s?
I guess because my wardrobe had just been 90% work-based clothing. Back then there were very few female project managers, especially within the telecoms industry. So whenever I would go to meetings, bear in mind I was maybe like, when I started it, 26 years old, so I was really young, and I felt like I had to power dress because I was always surrounded by men, and they were always older men, and I felt like they didn't respect me.
Right, okay.
Probably insecurities.
Yeah.
Probably issues I already had, deep-rooted.
We'll say something a whole other podcast.
No, but that's where it sort of came from. And so I felt like I knew how to dress for work, to power dress, and to look good.
Yeah. And was there anything on the market at the time that was doing this, or was there?
I mean, it was just, I wore clothes from the high street. I mean, I earned a very good amount of money, so I could afford the higher end of the high street, like LK Bennett and Reese, and really nice pieces like dresses and stuff. No, it's okay. Ladies, you all know what I'm talking about. But but I felt like those pieces were usually 100 plus, and not a lot of people have that amount of money to spend on one dress. Yeah,
for work as well, I suppose, isn't it?
And they get used and like worn out quickly if you're wearing it every day, or every other day. So I wanted to create a line of clothing that were my designs, and they were for I would say not the lowest end of the market. Not like, I'm not talking about, well, I could say Primark, but their prices have gone up now, haven't they? So a little bit more than they used to be, but something in the middle. So a bit more mass market,
but
sort of, yeah.
So 26 then, you're sitting there thinking, I could do this now.
Well, yeah. So when I had this stroke, I had all this spare time, and I just sort of started, the project manager in me decided that the only way I could work out how to build a business, because I had no idea what I was doing, so I started Googling it. Sounds really lame. And then things started coming up like from banks, like you need a business case. So then I downloaded like a Barclays business case template. It was terrible, but I filled it in.
Yeah.
I sat there at my desk with a pen. I printed it out and I thought, right, I'm going to make my business.
Yeah. Well, you've got to start somewhere, haven't you?
So yeah, and I just had to teach myself what I needed. I already knew about profit and loss because that was something I'd done day in, day out for years. So that was easy, the financial side of it. And then I just went hell for leather, trying to find out what things cost, what I would need, what makes a fashion business, patterns, fabric, where you get it from, this, that, and the other.
It's quite a supply chain, isn't it, for fashion, I would imagine.
Yeah, depending which way you do it.
Yeah. Like I suppose if you're trying to just put a logo on a cap, then it's pretty straightforward, isn't it? Yeah. But if you're going for the whole sort of like what's the material, make it from scratch type of thing, which is what you were doing, wasn't it?
Yes.
Essentially.
Yeah.
So that's by the sound of that, was that a mistake? Was that something you should have was it overly complicated for a first time?
I think it was very ambitious. I was still in my pretty stubborn phase of life,
right?
Even though the stroke did change me emotionally, a lot. It changed me, but I thought, this is what I want, and this is what I'm going to go and do, and I don't care what anybody else says. And I had this money behind me. Turns out it actually wasn't enough money.
Right.
So I had saved, I think it was 50 grand, 60 grand cash in the bank. That was my life reserves, plus any other little scraps that were here, there and everywhere. And because I had been a contractor, I was lucky enough that I could drain my business account.
Yeah.
Back then, the dividends allowance was a lot bigger, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So that worked in my favour. So I was able to drain the account and add that to what I'd had in the account. But you know what? It went nowhere.
Really?
That money just went.
So even with your business plan, you were seriously kind of underestimating the costs to set up a brand, really, isn't it, from scratch?
Yeah. So something really strange happened. So I couldn't have done it on my own. Just walking, you need a lot of contacts in the fashion industry.
Yeah.
Anyone who says that you don't, they're just talking out of their
proverbial.
Yeah, to be honest. And I had no idea about that. I thought, I'm 33, I can do whatever I want.
So you didn't know anybody in the industry at that point?
I knew nobody.
Right, okay.
I was just, I went down to London, I met with some pattern makers, I took them my designs and I'd said, what do you think? How much would it cost to make patterns? And I paid for them to make me patterns. I made my own samples. It was all great fun.
Yeah.
Then at the last minute, I went to my friend's barbecue in London. At the time I was living in Lincoln, going through the final parts of this divorce, and I didn't want to. I hadn't felt great. I didn't want to go, but I didn't want to get on the train. That was it.
Right.
Because it's a bit of a trek, isn't it? Really, it's a faff. Anyway, so I thought, no, do you know what? I haven't seen Duncan in a long time. I'm going to go down there. We're old uni friends. So I went down, got there late, turned up to the barbecue. It was in full swing. People were, 3 sheets to the wind.
Yeah.
We were getting there. And I thought, right, I'm going to have to catch up. So what happened was at that party, I was introduced to a lady who was, I think, quite well connected within her circle within London, because she worked for, I think she might have done, it's going to sound really bad that I say, but she worked for a hotel. Right. Or a chain of hotels. And she knew a fashion consultant. And she had said to me, because I've been telling her all about everything, you need to speak to this guy. He can really help you. And I thought, great, okay, that's weird connection.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I acted on it. And this chap turned out to be the connection that I needed to get my
break in.
To get my business off the ground and to where I wanted it. However, things sort of took a slightly different direction in the end, as to the final products that were produced.
Yeah.
But that was how it should have gone, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like, he gave me the right advice.
So at that, up to that point, you didn't really have anybody advising you in terms of, or anyone do you have anyone around you that you were talking to about the business, or
No.
just full steam ahead on your own?
Yeah.
You meet this chap, he introduces you. So from that point, then, is it roaring success? Sales start coming in.
Well, he obviously prepared me as much as he could. Because he'd been there, done it. He'd been to Fashion Week. He'd had his own career in that sense. Spent the money, made some money, and then he now was working for extremely high-end brands, doing other work for them.
Yeah.
And he did warn me, you know, this is going to cost a lot of money. And, you know, I invested thousands.
And did he give you any indication as to when? Because oftentimes, and I saw this in case the other day, it was on a call with a load of people, and we were talking about investment in businesses and startups and things like that. And I sort of threw out a number that we are spending on Google Ads at the moment. Just we're doing a bit of an experiment with some of our HubSpot stuff, and we've spent a couple of grand on it, I think, by now. I don't know the exact number, but the intake of breath in the room was kind of like, that's a huge amount of money.
That's not even that much.
And that kind of gave me an indication as to where people were. So it's one of those interesting questions. People say it's going to cost you quite a bit to get into this. Like the qualification around all of that is quite significant, because you know, $2,000 for someone can be nothing, or it can be absolutely everything, and it's their whole business. You know, the business plan. The business has got $2,000 in the bank, type of thing.
Yeah.
So at that stage, you're saying you've got $50,000, $60,000 plus or whatever, but that's still not even gonna, you know, what does that get you in the fashion world?
So obviously I was paying him for his help and his consulting fees, and his team helped develop my product into something wearable, because obviously I could design anything. Doesn't mean it's going to sell. He was the expert. So a lot of money went into him, and then obviously the fabric, the zips, the buttons, the samples. The samples weren't cheap. And they were made in London at the factory, and then obviously the whole run of the which wasn't a big run of the products. That was a lot of money.
So a lot of investment up front into just actually getting something before you can even think about
exactly. And you've not sold anything yet.
So then you've got your product, you've got something you think you can sell. So what's the next part of the story? How does that work then?
Well, in the background, I'd been setting up a website, which I can't remember what. I think I used somebody locally, and they created I think it was a WordPress website, which for me didn't work for me, because it's coding based, isn't it? And it was way above my head, so that didn't kind of work out in the end. And I ended up having one built on Yell.
Okay.
And that was more money. And that didn't work out. That was another 3,000 down the chute. Yell, I wouldn't recommend them. Don't go with Yell. I've ended up I've still got the same website now that was the final one that I put together, and that was just Squarespace.
Right, so you did it yourself in the end?
Did it myself. £24 a month.
So at that point, were you almost getting to the point of just spending money on external people rather than do it yourself, just because of a time point of view, or were you just thinking, I'm buying the expertise here? And
yeah, I didn't think that I was capable of doing some of the things, and whatever I read or whatever I listened to on YouTube, it was, oh, don't be the boss trying to do everything, be the cleaner, be the accountant, this, that, and the other. And I've always had an accountant anyway. Yeah. That's something you should definitely pay for. But there were certain things that.
So you were almost trying to delegate, but maybe too soon. Yeah.
I think
and
I
on
was,
things where you still needed that level of control over direction of travel and how it was going to look and feel and all of that.
And I didn't realise that basically the website wasn't the be all and end all at the start. I mean, you could probably just sell on Facebook. Yeah. Really.
Yeah.
If you really put your mind to it and not have a website. It doesn't, people find it a bit more secure, feel a bit more secure about you if you do have a presence like a website. But yeah.
So mistakes. So where is it? You've got your website set up. What's happened with it now? You still got the brand? Has it evolved? Where's it gone?
Yeah. So I launched the products actually out into the world in 2018. So we're 6 years down the line. Yeah. I've sold a lot.
Yeah.
They're still out there for sale. I have some plans though for the blouses. I do want to change. I mean, they're silk.
Yeah.
And
they're really nice. I mean, I think my wife might have one actually.
They were very expensive, but I've had to bring the price down because I just want to make it more accessible, and also I want to change the fabric that I'm using. But also with the brand, just before lockdown, I thought by diversifying the product set that I would make more money.
Right.
Or sell more products.
So when you say diversify, what different types of products?
Yeah.
So moving away from that core business of workwear, professional high-end workwear to...
I don't know. I didn't really have a reason why I did this. It was like a gut feeling. And it was in, I think, the August or September time before lockdown. I decided, I love keeping fit.
Yeah.
I thought, I'm going to sell activewear. Ooh, sportswear. Let's do that. I can do this. And so what I did was I bought products in and I branded them with my brand. I tested everything. Obviously, I'm not going to sell like see-through rubbish. But then it turned out lockdown happened, and then people were investing in activewear.
Right.
And it was completely just so lucky. And that kept my brand alive.
Right.
Yeah. And paid the bills in lockdown. And those products still sell now. And I love them, and they're really good quality, and they're not overly, they're not expensive. I made sure they're at the right price. And they come from within the UK.
Yeah. So you're shifting more to, so did the brand shift, or is it just an extra set of products you've got, or are you still making it up as you go along?
So obviously fitness is a real interest of mine. So I love the activewear side of it. And I still have some of the silk products to sell. So the fashion brand was my baby. And I've learnt a lot from it. And I think things have changed recently. So
if you were talking to someone now who was thinking about, maybe it's not a fashion business, but maybe it's any kind of business. If someone came to you and said, I'm thinking of starting a business, what would be your three top tips that you would give them from what you've learned from your experience?
3 top tips for starting a business.
Yeah. What questions should people be asking themselves based off your experience?
Okay. Well, considering I thought I had done enough, and I hadn't really, you can never do enough. You, above all, need to research the market. Whatever you're thinking of doing or selling or service, you need to research that is a requirement. Are you solving a client's problem? And what is that problem that you're solving? Because if you don't know what that is, you're sort of finger in the wind, selling to anybody, and it's not going to work. And I know, because secondly, you need to niche down your product or service. So by that, I mean, so the silk products were already a niche product. They were selling to people who could only afford a certain price bracket. They were silk. They were for a very specific market. And that was great. On the consultant that I worked with, that was, mainly him that helped me do that, because I didn't know. But then, when I bought in the activewear, because I was still quite naive, and it was still early days in that brand, I was just sort of selling it to anybody. But really, I know who exactly my market is now, because I know who's bought it. And,
okay, so you got some data now.
And the frequency of how it's been bought, and it's very interesting. So choosing your niche market is incredibly important. So you need to, when you decide, okay, I'm going to sell it into, so say for example, you've got a spanner, but it's not just a spanner. You want to sell that spanner to garages that only work on Rolls-Royce cars. That's who you're going to sell it to. But you have to commit to that, and you have to work out everything about your customer. So that garage that's working on Rolls-Royces, what is it about that? What do they do? Why do they need that spanner? What's it going to do for them? What problem is it solving? Absolutely everything.
So really get under the skin of it.
Yes. And when you start selling to that person, and it will work. When it's selling to your ideal customer and your niche market, then you'll get other people buying it as well, because that's just natural, isn't it? People just finding it. Actually, I like that. I need that.
But it's having that, I suppose, that focus of who you're actually going to target and who you're going to focus on. Bringing those customers in.
Because also that's going to define your goals for you, really, because we could just sit there, like I did with my business case, and go, okay, my goal is in 3 years' time to make £10 million.
You see that a bit.
And this, and then, that's not really a goal. Not a business goal at all. But I didn't know that. That wasn't my goal, by the way. Just going to say that. It's just But
no, like I think I hear what you're saying. It's like the goals really got to be rooted in something that's kind of
customer.
So there's I'm trying to think of there's a book called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, which I'm looking at on the bookshelf over there at the moment. Richard, I can't remember who wrote the book now. Richard something or other. Not Richard Buckle, somebody else. But yeah, he talks about strategy being this diagnostic, so a bit like market research, what's going on around here, really understand what's happening, and then the kind of around that you've got your kind of coherent, your guiding policies. So who are that's kind of how are we going to do things? How are we going to move towards our desired goal? Which I suppose is a little bit like you're going to niche down, or we're going to sell to everybody, or we're going to have a set of rules that you're going to obey. To guide you, and then around that as well, you then have the coherent action plan, which is around concrete goals that actually move you towards the desired destination. Which is kind of, I think, what you're sort of saying here is it's strategic at that point to say, figure out who you're trying to sell to, figure out what your environment is, niche, and then work out how you're going to get to those people.
Yeah.
And then actually have some tangible things that are kind of really cemented into the reality of what you're doing as goals, rather than these kind of, one day Rodney, like, maybe we'll be millionaires and
take over the world,
and we'll take over the world and we'll be bigger than Nike, all these kind of, whatever it is. It's like, those sorts of things I think are quite useful for people who are thinking about either starting up a business, or I think we did an episode on entrepreneurship where people are starting a new venture from within an existing company.
Oh, right, yeah.
A lot of the same principles transfer, because you're talking about use of resources and all that type of stuff, and how you go about doing it, and what's your game plan, and your go-to-market strategy, and all this type of thing. So, I suppose, would you do it again if you could do it all again? The $10 million question, would you?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. It's a life-changing thing. Not working for somebody else. And I don't mean that I don't want it to sound derogatory, because obviously I had employers up until the age of 33. And I've had part-time jobs since then, but in terms of being able to change yourself and change your life, like doing things when you want to do them, how you want to do them, just learning and just having a life lesson. That's what it's done. And there's nothing wrong with working for somebody else, but it's hard to put it into words, isn't it? Is
it so almost a sense of so a sort of the internal challenge of you trying to, your personal growth has been linked to the business, the building. I mean, I had a similar thing renovating a house, and at the end of it impacted me much more than I thought it was going to do, because it was a pretty big project. And at the end of it, because there were moments through it that I thought, what have I done here? I've taken the roof off my house, and literally we can't live here anymore, and we don't have any bathrooms left in it, and we don't have anything left in it. And if it all goes horribly wrong now, I'm not quite sure how this is going to work. But you come through the other side of those experiences.
Yeah.
And there is something where you think, do you know what? I've grown as a person. It's like a balloon or something. You put another few puffs of air into the balloon, and you've expanded the surface area of what you're capable of. And you realise that actually, no, I can do things that I thought were impossible before, and now they're possible. And
I think that's a good example.
And the sort of this, and then maybe that opens up other horizons, and the scope of what you feel you were able to achieve is probably wider now than it was before you started whatever it was you were starting. So, for example, your business or whatever, and you think that's kind of so there's a personal. So people should do it for the personal as well as the professional experience.
Yeah, and everyone's on their own timeline. So someone might feel like when they're 20, God, I can't work for anybody anymore. And that's fine. Or it might be when you're 60. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that's a good point, because there's a lot of pressure now, especially if you look at like the Instagram and everything. It's like, be an influencer, start your own business, have 27 rental properties by the time you're 15 that you've got in some sort of trust fund that you set up for your.
It's not really. I don't think it's
just. I think it's a lot of pressure, isn't it? Like you say. And I think I read this interesting thing a while back about how as we actually get older, you'll be able to have multiple careers, whereas in the past it was like, okay, well, you either go and get a job and you have a career for 40 years and retire and whatnot. Whereas now it's almost possible to have multiple careers because we're either living longer, or just because we've got access to so many opportunities to start businesses. It's probably easier to start a business now than it was when you set yours up, or than it was 30, 40 years ago. There's so many tools and so many things around. So awesome. So, well, thank you very much. I'm sure that will have inspired some people to think about starting a business. But it's always really good to have people on who've actually done it. It's all, you hear a lot of people talking about starting a business or, but actually to have done it, lived through it, and, the ups and downs of it all, there's so many lessons in all of that that people can learn from.
It's not an easy path, and there's a lot of work. More work than you're working now in your employment.
But the rewards...
it just takes time.
Yeah.
You just have to accept it's going to take time. It's not going to be instant, unless you're one of those, the lucky people who,
if you get it right,
the nail on the head straight away.
But if we all knew how to do that, then if everyone knew how to do that, then everyone would be running massively successful businesses.
Yeah.
And like you say, it's not. I think the time thing is important. There's. It doesn't. What does success look like? Is success just doing it on your own? Because that, for a lot of people, there's a huge amount of value in that.
Yeah.
Rather than, kind of the self-reliance and all that type of thing. So appreciate your insights on that.
Thanks very much.
That's all right. So thank you for listening to the SME Growth Podcast. Please remember to like and subscribe and to tell all of your friends that we're here doing this. And next week, I'm sure Mr. Parry will be back so he can do these fine intros and outros that he normally does, and you won't have to listen to me rambling on. But in the meantime, all the best with your businesses. Thank you.